Oh,
Alrighty, and the show has started. Heyo, guys, girls, and everyone in between. This is Rebellious Pastry here, and I'm here with my friend. Um, let me go ahead and go through announcements. So this weekend, I believe. Oh yeah, this weekend I'm gonna be showing off Inktober. Last weekend was an animation video, and then um, I'm gonna go ahead and start. You guys know how to um interact with this show. In case you guys don't, please go ahead and ask questions anytime in the chat and put a donut after the question so I know that you're talking to me. And my guest just left. Hello? Hello? Why did you leave on me? Hello?
hello.
You left.
I'm sorry about that. I thought I was on.
um, just so you know, the the phone call is literally on air. So, you're on the stream show. You're on air. It don't question it. It's just my setup. But what else? Um, please make sure to go ahead and put a donut after your comment so that we know that you're talking to us, not each other. Because I think it's awkward to read in the middle of somebody's conversation. But please don't be fooled. I still moderate all the comments. Um, but yeah. Anyways, let's go ahead and actually get on with the show now. Alrighty, so what is your name?
Hi, everybody. My name is Callie Graham, and I'm a dietitian.
You didn't have to go so professional on the name, by the way. You know you could have just went by a nickname, right?
That's okay. I don't mind.
Alrighty, so and then I shared before I say anything, what are your pronouns?
Her, hers, she.
She, already. I already know that, but I was about to call you a they because the base don't know your pronouns. But
Gotcha.
I just share, and also I tend to do that a lot. All right, so if I ever accidentally call you a they, please correct me. Alrighty.
It's okay.
So we've got her Instagram by the name of Eat to Flourish. I literally saw a ton of food on there. So, if I didn't already have someone on for cooking, I might have, which, she might come back for cooking. But, anyways, what is your hobby?
My hobby is gardening, which goes nicely into cooking and eating, but I want to talk about gardening.
Yeah. Hold on. So, how did you find gardening?
I got into gardening because when I was really little, my mom liked to garden, and also my grandma, my mom's mom.
I see. So it's like a passed down family tradition.
And I saw them having fun with it. And then when I was little, I would help them. And then when I moved out and went to college, I started gardening a little bit myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like this is gonna go very similarly to the previous hobby interview show, but whatever. Um, why are you interested in it, slash, why do you do it?
So I do it because it feels good to dig in the earth and play with dirt and plant things that are going to be beautiful. And I also really like eating some of the things that I garden.
So you, so you mostly grow things to eat. I see.
I do a lot of both, but I have a huge part of my backyard that is fruit and vegetables and herbs.
Okay, I'm gonna ask you more into detail, like, um next, like a few questions down, like after the preset ones are over, because it's like I know what you grow, and I'm
Oh.
kind of scared to eat your food because of it. And don't worry, don't worry, this is a channel appropriate thing. Um, but yeah. Anyways, alrighty. Um, how much does it cost?
So it depends on what you buy, and it depends on how much you can water. So let me give you some examples. So we're in a state. Do people know where we are?
I say Colorado.
Okay, good. So we're in Colorado. So that means it snows here in the winter and everything, it looks like it's dead, but it's actually just sleeping for the winter. They call it being dormant. So if you plant plants that will come back every year and take their winter nap being dormant, then they'll still come back the next year. So you don't have to buy anything new. It just comes back. But if you buy things that die when it snows and then you buy more of them the next year, then it costs a lot.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you're planting. And then it depends on how much water it needs. So there are certain plants that need a lot more water than others. So if you get plants that don't need a lot of water, then it costs less to water them.
Alrighty, I see. So my purpose for asking this question is more of the whole if someone were to just start from scratch, and let's say, since we're in Colorado, let's say that someone just woke up one day and is just like, of course, during the right time of the year, but let's say someone just woke up one day when it's like the right time of the year, and they're like, "Hey, I want to start a garden." How much would it start? How much would it cost? Like brand new, you've never gardened before, and you're just wanting to start
I would
it.
say if you just wanted to get started, if you already have a patch of dirt that you can grow in, then you would probably spend I'd say about $50, because you would get some new soil to give the area you have nutrients. And then you would probably get some tools that you'd use for a long time, like it's like a little rake that you use in the dirt, and then a shovel, and then some different plants that would last through the winter. So I'd say $50 to get started. And then once you get that started, you can add things later.
Is
And
that
then you can,
is that $50 including the seeds?
uh,
Is that $50 including the seeds?
yes. So you can buy the seeds or you can buy starter plants, or both.
I see. So this is basically like it depends on where you are with how much everything costs.
Yeah, about. But if you live in a place that doesn't have any dirt, then you might spend an extra $20 to get some pots.
Yeah. So it depends on the state for the cost.
Yeah, that too.
So how much would it cost on average to start up a garden?
I think average $75.
All right. Oh man, that's cheaper than my equipment. But this show isn't about me. I'm just saying. Um and then you kind of touched on this next question, but it's kind of a supporting question to the question before that. Um but please get in at least a little bit more detail here. But is this a one cost hobby, or is it something that you keep on paying for?
You have a cost up front, but the things that you keep reusing, like your tools, like your shovel and your little rake, and if you get plants that come back every year, they'll come back. So it's not $75 every time, but it might be, an extra 30 later. And it depends on how big you want to make it, because if you later want to expand, then you'll pay more for more seeds and more plants. And
so what I'm hearing is depending on the plants, right?
Let me tell you. So if you have like a little patch that's like 3 feet by 3 feet in the yard, and you get plants that will come back every year, then you probably will only spend another 20 the next year to get maybe just some nutrients, maybe some flowers to put with it.
I see. So it depends on what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
So,
which is good. It's flexible. So you can spend lots of money and make it real big every year, or you can just spend a little bit and have like some pots of tomatoes if you want.
Yeah. So you're basically saying like it depends on how far you want to go.
Absolutely.
That's honestly probably most hobbies.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Cause like I think I honestly just feel like how far you want to go with it is also like a very like depends on the hobby and depends on how much time you want to go ahead and spend on it. But so do you make money off of it?
Usually not. I will trade people in the neighborhood for different fruits and vegetables and plants.
I see. So like with trading, this is just an enforcing question, but like do you tend to go ahead and like try to make the trades fair, or do you just go ahead and be like, "Oh, here you go"?
Yep, we try to make them fair. So I'll give you some more examples. So I have an apple tree and a peach tree, and that's part of my garden. And my neighbors have a cherry tree and a pear tree. So when we trade with each other, we'll trade like 1 bucket of peaches for 1 bucket of pears.
And the buckets are the same size, right?
We use those orange Home Depot buckets. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, it's just because like someone could just get a tiny bucket and just be like, "Hey, I'm gonna trade you this tiny bucket for your huge bucket."
No, we're pretty fair because I'm trading with people that I know, or they're friends of friends, and so we're all good to each other.
Yeah.
But I can't think of a time that I ever sold anything. We've always just traded, or sometimes when I have extra herbs, there's extra oregano in my garden and parsley, and sometimes there's so much of it I'll just give it to people at work.
Yeah. Which this is just another reinforcement question, but think you'll ever sell your stuff at a farmer's market?
I think so. So I've looked into doing that, and farmers markets, you have to sign up to rent a table every weekend. And the tables are maybe like $150 to $200. And I don't think I would sell enough peaches and apples, and I wouldn't have enough stuff to sell to be able to be at the farmer's market every weekend and make a profit.
Oh, I see. So, it would just be for like most generally the people that can go ahead and get like fast turnaround to go ahead and go at the farmers markets.
A lot of the people that are at farmers markets have a farm as a business, and they have so many different kinds of fruit and vegetables and flowers that they have something to sell every week because different things are ready every week. So my peaches and apples are ready in the fall right now, but I don't have any other fruit that's ready earlier in the summer. So I don't have anything to give. But these other places that have big farms, they have lots of other things that grow early in the year. They may be other vegetables. And so because they plan it out to where something is growing and ready to eat every week, they can make a profit and they can afford to be at the farmer's market because they'll maybe make $1,000 and the table was only 200.
Holy smokes. So you're basically saying that it'd be like a different structure of like gardening as opposed to what you do, right?
Yeah, because I do it as a hobby and that would be a business.
Yeah. I feel like with some hobbies you could turn them into businesses,
Uh-huh.
but it'd be a lot of work.
Yeah.
Um, um, do you make money off of it? I already asked that. Alrighty, so this next question, when I made this, show, I was thinking more of the whole like, good for all year hobbies, but like, oh, do you garden all year, like 365, or like abouts, or is
I
there like
do.
an on or off season?
Well, I do garden all year long, but it changes because in the winter, excuse me, in the winter when things are dormant outside because there's snow, I have a hydroponic garden in the basement. Do you know what that is?
Yes, I do.
Do you think our listeners know what that is?
I believe so. Just please
Just really
remember,
quick,
this is a channel appropriate garden.
it is. So in my basement, you can do hydroponics, which means instead of growing plants in dirt, you grow them in water that has nutrients in it. So everything I grow is vegetables.
I've
So,
seen I've seen those hydroponics. I believe Mama Pastry used to have some.
oh, so yeah, mine are in my basement, and you have lights for them, and you have the nutrients that you add to the water. But I grow different vegetables, and then I do that during the winter when everything is frozen outside.
Yeah, alrighty. So, I'm gonna ask this question a little differently than like I would normally ask it, just because of like the fact that, and I do this for any seasonal hobby, but how many hours a week do you typically spend on slash with it? And
In When it's not snowing, I spend at least an hour every day, and on the weekend, probably 2 hours each weekend day.
so 2 hours each weekend, and how many each weekday?
An hour, 1 hour every day, Monday through Friday, but then 2 hours Saturday, 2 hours Sunday.
So this is just a reinforcement question, but like, what do you do in those 1 to 2 hours? Is that spent watering, or is that spent doing other things?
Good question. So I water a little bit, but I have sprinklers, so not too much. But I do weeding. I pull the weeds out. I add more nutrients to the soil. And it takes me a whole hour and 2 hours on the weekends because my yard is so big. So obviously, if you just have one little part of a garden or you have plants in pots, then it might only take you 10 minutes every day. But because my garden is so big, I have to check every plant and see if there's any bugs on it. And if there are bugs, I have to do different things to get rid of the bugs. And then I pull all the weeds, and I have to do trimming of the plants because it helps them grow. There's a certain way you trim certain plants so that they grow better. And I clean up any dead leaves that are around. And then things are ready at different times, and I plant things at different times. So, for example, in May, I put all the pea seeds in the ground, and then they start growing. So once they're in the ground, I don't have to do very much to them until they start popping up. But then I'll move on, and then the next month I'll put in green bean seeds. So there's different plants that I'll work on every couple weeks.
I see. So it just depends on like what time it is, literally.
Uh-huh.
What time is it? Do you go time?
I do.
It depends on what time it is. Oh man. Let's just say that I don't know how many like bad puns I make in real life, but let's just say that they don't go away on this show. If anything, they'll get worse. They'll get bratwurst.
Oh boy. Here we go.
Oh man. It's kind of a part of the show, honestly. For us to just be silly. But anyway, so you say an hour to 2, and then how about during winter?
Then in winter, it's not very much because it only takes me about 10 minutes every day to check on the hydroponics.
See. How has gardening helped you?
It is very stress relieving to be able to come home from my daily job and be able to go pull weeds and pick bugs off of my plants and squish the bugs. And
you bug killer.
It's just really nice to be outside, and I do a lot of exercises because I like squat up and down to pull weeds. So it makes me feel good, and I get to be outside in the sunshine. So it makes me feel very calm and happy.
I see. I'm just like laughing a little bit because one of the reasons of why I do this show is to go ahead and expose my base to things that aren't just animation. And you literally explained something that's literally the polar opposite of animation.
Is the back of my yard. My neighbors can see me because it's raised up higher than my house, and so the back part of my yard, my neighbors could see me from their living rooms, and sometimes they laugh at me because I'm up in the garden doing squats. And
oh man, if I was your neighbor, I would so be laughing at you.
I know you would. And then another funny story. One time I was up there in the garden and I had really old shoes on and they were really slippery and it was kind of wet on the top and I slipped because I was like kind of on the very edge and I slipped and I fell off into the flowers that were below. And I was laughing at myself and my neighbor came over and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, "Yeah, I fell into a bunch of flowers." So they caught my fall.
Yeah. Be careful out there, apparently.
Well, I know.
Apparently it takes more coordination to garden than I thought.
It's more balanced than you thought. Yeah.
Oh man, I would trip over my own foot. Very much. Or trip over the plant, more likely.
Yeah, you would probably more likely trip over the time. You trip over the time.
Yes, I would. Oh man. And then what are the downsides to gardening?
I do get dirty. My fingernails get really dirty. If I garden right after I have a nice manicure, then I have to wear extra gloves so that my nails don't get messed up. Sometimes it hails, and so I have to be careful because I go outside and I try to cover up my plants with baskets and buckets when it hails, and I get pelted in the head. So that's not very good. And you don't have to do that. I mean, you could choose not to do that. But sometimes, in Colorado, it gets stormy in the afternoon and it hails. And I run outside when I get home and like cover up my plants with buckets. So I have gotten hailed on.
Ouch.
And then I am outside. So I put on sunscreen so I don't get burned. I've gotten burned before because I forget sunscreen on my face and my neck.
Yeah.
But as long as you think about it ahead of time, then you can prevent most of the issues.
Yeah, that's understandable. And um I don't know what I was thinking when oh yeah, positives and negatives because of like how I wrote the questions. Because you've got to admit with all hobbies you got the downsides.
Oh yeah.
Depending
Well,
on
one
depending
other downside is that sometimes bugs will eat your plants, and then I get really upset.
so you pretty much are saying bugs and um bugs and weather
Yes.
are the downsides.
Yep.
So my last predetermined question before I ask you literally like I feel like it's gonna be 1,000,002 random mass questions. Um and trust me, they get pretty far in there.
Okay.
But
Okay.
but yeah, I definitely do. Alrighty, so um, would you recommend gardening to others? Please note that others don't just mean me. Um, I mean like everyone, like just in general.
I do it because you can do as little or as much as you want to. So even if you have, like I said, even if you have some pots that have some flowers or some tomatoes, it just makes it nice to like be connected to the earth a little bit.
Yeah, that's understandable. So you saying yes?
Yes,
So you would recommend it?
I do recommend it, and as little as or as much as you want.
Yeah. So my first question is how big is your gardens every year?
So my backyard is a quarter acre.
Holy smokes. Oh yeah, I've seen it, but like also, if you have any pictures, feel free to send them to me so I can show people people on air. As long as they
Okay.
don't I doubt that you're gonna have any pictures of your garden with my face in them, but
So everything that I have on Insta is a lot is from my yard, but I'll look in there and make sure I send you specifically a picture of the backyard.
yes. just just make sure like it's fine if there's other people's faces in them, but just not mine.
I have just pictures of the yard by itself because
Yeah.
I don't like to put I have lots of different pictures, so if there's something with people in it, then I just share it with the group of people, but if I also like to have pictures without people so that we can just talk about the plants.
And it's also fine if you want to go ahead and send me pictures of your face. Also, please send them through Instagram because there is shot service most of the time where I'm currently at.
Okay.
But yeah. Um so how big was your biggest garden ever?
It's this is still the same place that I live now. But that year, there's a particular year I had 25 tomato plants. That was the biggest like tomatoes I've ever had, like the most.
20
25 tomato plants and then 15 pepper plants.
Man, 25 tomato plants.
Yeah, it was delicious. We ate tomatoes all the time.
25
Uh-huh.
tomato plants.
I was busy.
Oh man, if I did that, I would never get a video done. But yeah, oh man, 25 tomato plants. Oh, so let's see here. I asked you biggest garden. What's the smallest garden you've ever had?
The smallest quote unquote garden was when I was in college in an apartment and I had a balcony or a patio and it I had pots of tomatoes and marigold flowers and peas.
And keys?
No, peas,
Oh,
like
peas.
PEA.
Sorry. I was just checking the chat real quick. I'm like, you growing keys in your garden?
Maybe you could like put keys, like old keys in there to keep the snails out. That might be interesting.
Hmm. It could be a key to something great.
Oh,
But yeah. So you're saying that your smallest garden was while you were in college?
yes, ma'am. It was because I still
Uh
wanted things because I moved out from my parents' house. And like I said, I helped my mom garden and I still wanted to have tomatoes because they're one of my favorites to grow because homegrown tomatoes taste a lot better than store tomatoes.
Yeah, I've heard that. And also a note for on and off the show. Please don't call me ma'am again. I honestly prefer sir.
It's just a habit. I'm sorry.
It's fine. I I'm just like, ouch. Nothing you did. It's just like, oh. Um, please sir over ma'am. But yeah. Anyway, back to the show. What's the hardest thing to grow?
That's a good question. Let's see. I have really wanted to grow blueberries, and they have been a failure. So blueberries, they want a very particular type of acid base balance in the soil. And I bought some blueberry plants. They are just like little sticks and they grow into bushes. And I've tried to plant them 3 different times in 3 different spots in my yard, and they die every time. And when I was asking some people at the nursery about it, they said, oh, you have to get your soil tested. And then if it's not the right pH, acid base balance, you have to add certain nutrients to make it right. And then you have to like retest it every few months and make sure that the soil is the right balance. And I was reading on different online forums about growing berries that you kind of have to send your dirt to an official testing place because the kits that you can buy to test your soil at Home Depot are not accurate. So I then looked up like who would take my soil samples, and CU Boulder, you can mail a baggie of soil to them, but they charge you $45 to test it.
And then you say that you would have to test
all the time.
All the time? How is it that I've heard blueberries are one of the cheaper berries. How is this?
Well, I mean, maybe they're cheaper to buy, and maybe some people's yards have the right balance and they don't have to test, they just grow, but they don't like my yard. But on the other hand, I have raspberries and they grow great. And so whatever the difference is between what raspberries want and blueberries want, blueberries don't like it.
Yeah, I'm guessing part of it is that we're in Colorado and it's hard to grow stuff in Colorado.
Yeah, I don't know because the raspberries grow fine. So, I've tried a few times and I just kind of gave up and I said, I'll get my blueberries somewhere else. I don't need to spend money trying to grow them myself.
That's understandable. There's definitely some things that you have to buy yourself instead of go ahead and grow them.
It would just be too much money to grow them to like try to keep the soil right and keep them happy. They're very needy. Blueberries are very needy and don't want them.
Oh man. All right. So what's the easiest thing to grow?
Peas. They grow anywhere you plant them, and you can plant them early in the spring and they're tolerant of some of the cold dirt that is still kind of hanging around in Colorado in May, because the soil doesn't really warm up a lot until June, but you can plant peas in May and they'll start growing in about two weeks. So they grow great. And they don't have to be started in the house in a pot. You can just put them right in the ground, and a couple weeks later they start growing. They're awesome.
Yeah. So you're saying peas are the easiest, and then blueberries are the hardest?
So far in my yard, yes.
Yeah, and if you were to move away, would you have to relearn the soil in your new location?
Yeah, probably. I would have to experiment with just planting different things to see if they live and like in different yards. And I kind of know just by planting things through my life so far, certain things like to have more sun, like peppers and tomatoes like to be in the sunniest spot in your yard. But then zucchini and squash like to be in like half sun, half shade. They don't like to be all shade, but having a spot in the yard where they get both is good. And then things like basil and dill herbs, they like to be in the shade. So just by some of the things that I've learned, I would kind of know where to at least try to put them, but it'd have to be a lot of experimenting.
I see. So you would basically have to go ahead and redo. Also, can you please send me those pictures
Yeah.
through Instagram?
You want me to do them right now?
Yes, like right now, so that I can stick them up on air.
Okay.
Also, yeah. So just so you know, for the people who just hopped in, we're currently talking about gardening. But yeah, we're currently having, we agreed to your nickname would be Kaylee for this show, right?
Yeah, I love it.
Oh man. So a little already. So this is just like a personal, like more of an inside joke question, but how much kale do you grow a year?
That's a good question because it grows all year. I grow it all year long. A
Ah.
lot. um, I have I usually have two kale plants growing at all times. So I put kale in all kinds of stuff.
And this is why I don't come over often. Just kidding. Just kidding.
I can put kale in eggs. I can blend it up in a smoothie. I can put it
Oh.
in spaghetti. I can put it in chili. I can put it in stir fry.
Who would want to mess up all those amazing food with kale?
Me, I would mess up all those foods.
No. All right. Let's see here. What's your favorite thing to grow?
Tomatoes.
I was surprised you didn't say kale for that one.
Well, I mean, kale is good, but tomatoes tastes so good.
Why did you send me a picture of you making apple crisps?
Well, because that comes from my garden, so I wanted you to have that.
I see. um, but yeah. um, what is your favorite thing to have people eat?
Well, that's a good question. So when I grow peppers, people really do like when I do poblano spicy peppers with cheese and bacon. So
So like the
people
poppers?
like that. And I like making people, so I like to have people over for brunch a lot. And depending on the time of year, I'll make things that are ready from the garden.
What's your
So when there's tomatoes ready, I like doing caprese sandwiches. So that's mozzarella cheese with tomatoes and basil and balsamic and olive oil. And so I grow the basil and the tomatoes, and people like that.
So you like to have people over all the time.
I do.
I
And I
see.
have all kinds of things. So when people come over, There's grapes in my yard, and like people just come over and eat those off the vine.
I'm gonna go ahead and put the grapes over my face. Apparently,
I
just
sent you a picture a little bit of the yard, and it has my dogs in the picture, but you can see how there's levels of my garden because the dogs are in the grass, and then there's the flower bed that I fell into,
oh
and then there's the top part.
no! Did you have any like very like did you have any lasting injuries from that?
No,
I'm
no,
surprised
it's fine.
when I went over to your place. I was surprised I didn't like completely trip and fall and hurt myself.
Well, I mean, it's not too bad.
But yeah, so what year did you have the least amount of stuff grown?
I guess it was, let's see, 20. We had a year that was really rainy. I think maybe it was 2017. I don't remember exactly, but it was a year that was super rainy and there wasn't a lot because it rained so much. There wasn't a lot of sun during the day, and the tomatoes and the peppers really like it sunny, so they didn't do well. And then part of my yard flooded, and a bunch of plants died because it flooded. So that wasn't good.
Um,
Let's see. And then, every year in the spring, or I should say, in the fall, I get tired because I'm out a lot, like taking care of the garden. And so I say, I'm going to have a smaller garden next year. I'm going to make it smaller so I don't have as much work to do.
let me guess.
But then every comes and I get more excited, and then I plant more stuff every year.
I was gonna guess that you were gonna have a bigger garden each year, but yeah. Oh man, that sounds like a lot of work. Are you sure you recommend this to others?
Yeah, because you just start out smaller than what I did.
Uh, yeah, I mean, I guess as far as gardening goes, it's like one of those um one or multiple sizes fit most. It
Yeah.
fits most people. So
And
how
when
do you remember to water your plants? I swear.
I just go do it every day. That's why.
I swear, if I had to be in charge of plants, I would forget to water them.
um,
Kind of like
yeah,
Mama Pastry.
I just do it every day, and then I check on things every day. But a lot of it doesn't have to be watered by hand because I have the sprinklers, but I just check on them. Like I'll go and see if anything needs any extra water. But most of the time, the sprinklers get everything.
Yeah, understandable. So, what out of all plants, what takes up the most space?
Um, Green beans take up a lot of space because you have to have a fence or trellis or something for them to grow on, and so you have to have a place to like spread out the fencing. And when I say fence, I don't mean like chain link fence, but it's kind of like probably 3 feet high. That's just like some thin wire, and it makes a fence. And the beans grow up the fence into the little like nooks and crannies of the fence, and then the beans grow off of that. So I sent you a picture of the garden in the winter also.
Okay, just give my phone and my computer a little bit more time.
And that's why I don't garden in the winter. You'll see how much snow is out there.
Yeah, let's just say, I'm not gonna say exactly where, but let's just say where I ended up, it's gonna snow a ton, so I'm gonna get snowed in a good bit. So, definitely not, like, if you're in the mountains, I would say, probably not gardening place to be, but,
Yeah.
so, let's see. What year was the photo taken in?
Oh, that was in the winter, like this February.
What was I doing this February? Probably making my Valentine's Day special. But yeah. So um con- gorgeous scenery. Yes indeed. um so have you ever grown pumpkins?
Yes. Some years I grow pumpkins and you know what? That's actually I didn't think about them. They take up more room. So they have vines that spread out all over the place. And so even though I planted them in a little planter, the vines like just went up and over the planter and went everywhere. So they actually take up more room than the green beans do. But I didn't grow them the past couple of years because they're so cheap in the store. And I didn't get that many pumpkins. I think I only got 4. So I figured for all the watering that I put into it, it'd be better to grow something else that gives me more fruit or vegetable for that amount of water.
Yeah, what's the biggest pumpkin you've ever grown?
Uh, Not too big. My pumpkins were only about the size of a bowling ball.
Yeah, my grandma once grew a pumpkin and man, that pumpkin was just as big as me as a little child.
Oh, jeez. So I did, you know those little tiny pumpkins that you can get that like fit in your hand? They're more decorative. You don't really eat them.
What happened if I want to eat them?
Well, I guess you could, but I don't know if there's that much flesh to really make cookies out of. But those little, I didn't know I could buy seeds for those because I've never seen the seeds in the store for those little mini pumpkins. But I found that I could order the seeds online, so I might try those next fall.
So, going on the course of this show, do you have any like websites that you recommend for the states, like for the United States, for like a place to order seeds from?
Yes, and I can find them and
Send me
put
the
them in the
link so I can
yeah.
put it in the chat. But so let's see here. What's better? What's funner to grow? Fruits or vegetables or flowers?
Mm, I think a combination of all of them is good. You have to have some flowers for your garden, your vegetable. If you're going to plant vegetables and fruits, you have to have flowers that the bees like because the bees have to pollinate your plants in order for you to get actual fruit and vegetables from the plants themselves. So I have lots of flowers that the bees like.
I
And
didn't
that's so if
know
you're
that.
allergic to bees, that's a really bad downside of gardening because you need lots of bees. And if you're allergic, then you're out there with the bees, and that's probably not good.
Yep. So um, have you ever gotten stung while gardening?
No.
That's good.
They leave me alone. I have all kinds of different things. I have big black bumblebees. Then I have some bees that are like the size of a nickel and they are
Oh, jeez.
yellow and black. And then I have some that are yellow, black, and red, and those are really scary. I don't know if those are like murder bees or something like murder hornets.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and then regular like tiny little bees, and then lots of butterflies, and all of those things like to pollinate your plants. So I welcome them all into my yard.
Hmm. I see. I didn't know. I thought bees were just there to help the plants, not. I didn't think they were required.
Yeah, you have, I mean, if you don't have something to bring the bees to your yard, then they might not come to pollinate your things. So the tomatoes, when they grow, they have a little yellow flower, and that's where the tomatoes will actually, the tomato plant is green, but then there's these little yellow flowers, and the bees have to pollinate the flower in order for the tomato to grow.
I see. So, um, is there any plants that um, that you grow where like you don't get people to eat the stuff out of it?
Tree plants that don't need the bees.
Like, let's say you grow this plant and then no one wants to eat its product.
Oh, you mean like zucchini?
Man, um, I'm not a gardener myself, but I do know how big zucchinis can get, and
Yeah.
so many, so many zucchinis can be produced from one zucchini plant. It's ridiculous.
It kind of is. It's crazy. So you have to pick them. You have to look at your plant every day because if you forget about it, you're going to have a zucchini that's the size of a watermelon.
Oh man, what's the longest zucchini you've ever grown?
Oh, probably like 15 inches long.
Oh man.
Yeah, it wasn't very good. It got too like stringy, and I wound up slicing it up into really thin slices and making pickles out of them, like zucchini pickles.
I see. I was gonna say I thought zucchinis were or pickles were from cucumbers.
So traditional pickles are from cucumbers, but the term pickle, it really refers to the brine that you're putting the vegetable in. So you can pickle beets, you can pickle
No, 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 no.
green beans, you can pickle radishes, you can pickle onions. But traditionally, when you say pickle, it means cucumbers.
Yeah. Have you tried to grow cucumbers?
Yeah, and the cucumbers, they they like it sunny also, but I usually grow cucumbers and I like to experiment with different kinds of cucumbers. So there's Japanese cucumbers, Persian cucumbers, and they don't have as thick of a skin and they're a little bit crunchier, so I like eating those a little bit better.
I see. Have there been anything you haven't tried yet to grow?
Oh yeah, I'm sure there is. I just have to think about it for a minute. I really want to start growing mushrooms,
Channel
and they
appropriate mushrooms, I hope.
yes, and like regular button mushrooms that you put in salad.
I swear, I did not think of all the things that could go wrong with this episode when I originally
Regular,
planned it.
and I want to try to grow corn. I've never tried to grow corn before, but I think it would be really tasty.
I feel like corn would take a lot of space.
Yeah, it does, and I think that's probably why I haven't done it yet. Um, and I've tried watermelon before, and I've tried cantaloupe. I'm trying to think of another fruit I haven't tried. But I have lots of herbs, like oregano and basil and thyme and dill, tarragon. I
What's
grow lots of
tarragon?
onions. Tarragon is just an herb, like a spice,
I see.
and cilantro and parsley. I'm trying to look outside right now to like see what I would put out there next year. Oh, you know what else I grew one year? I grew stevia, the plant that's the leaves are sweet.
Oh yeah, it is an artificial sugar, I believe.
Well, you can dry the leaves and mash them up and then use them like sugar.
Yeah, they're considered an artificial um
Hmm.
has
But I'd grow more of that because I grew one plant and then I dried the leaves and then I had like, I don't know, maybe like a quarter of a cup of like mashed down leaves. So I only used it in like tea in my as kind of like in my tea ball with the other tea leaves so when the tea brewed, then the sweetness leached into the tea.
Yeah. I personally know that stevia is a artificial sugar because I swear, with having an aspartame intolerance for IRL reasons,
Yeah.
it's kind of um it's kind of difficult because I
Yeah.
literally have to check the labels to diet everything. So
Yeah.
I personally just stay away from that junk altogether. But yeah, stevia, I didn't know like how planty it was.
Yeah.
Um, so what's the most interesting plant you've ever tried to grow?
Brussels sprouts.
Oh, I was gonna ask you, but then I forgot. And now apparently we're looping it back. But you how was that?
Brussels sprouts. They took all all season. I planted them in May and they weren't done until October and they almost frosted and like died. But they grow on a stalk. And I don't know if people have seen how Brussels sprouts grow. If you haven't, then you should Google it because they grow really weird. So they have this really thick stalk, and then these little round sprouts like grow up the stalk.
Hmm. I guess it would
So
be I guess it would be better not to grow them at that point.
I think I don't really like growing in Colorado, but maybe other places might have more luck. But I had this huge plant that was like 2 feet tall, and then all these leaves grow on it. And then you have to like pick off all the leaves, and then you have the sprouts. So I'm going to take a picture of my seeds right now so you can see, and then I'll put it
Alright.
in
And
the
then
chat. But and then this is a good seed company, Lake Valley Seeds. So let me send this in Messenger.
not Messenger, Instagram because my messenger
Well, that's what I mean.
is kind of
Instagram, like
finicky.
Insta
Yeah.
Messenger.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just saying that phone has been kind of finicky here. But yeah. Have you ever done container gardening before?
Yeah, and that's when I was in college. I had pots, and that's your container. You could have different size containers. You can have big rectangle containers, and you can have round pots. And lettuce grows really well in containers.
Hmm. Brussels sprout seeds.
So that's what they look like. They grow on that stalk, but whoever took this picture, they had to pick off all the leaves because there's a leaf around every Brussels sprout. And I have the pictures somewhere. They're not on my phone, but I have the pictures of them. And it was a long time ago, like 6 years ago.
So, I'm gonna emphasize Lorenzo's question here. And would you say that container gardening's better or from the ground?
Well, container gardening has a lot of positives because it takes more effort for snail to like climb up the container. So your plants are a little bit more protected. And when you water your container garden, the moisture stays in the pot better and doesn't evaporate as quickly as in the ground. And then you can change the soil easier than having to dig it up out of the ground, and you don't get as many weeds. So there's a lot of positives to container gardening.
What are the negatives to container gardening?
You don't have as much space, so you can't grow corn in a container.
I thought that one would have been obvious, but apparently, like, have you ever considered doing a corn maze?
No, I mean, I have a big yard, but that's too much.
So, if you had no limit to how big your yard could be, how big would your garden be?
Oh.
If you had no limits at all on how big your garden was.
Well, I have quarter acre, and so I would probably, because you still have to take care of it all, right? And I wouldn't want to hire someone to help me. So I think I wouldn't go any bigger than like a half acre, and that would be my whole property. Because then I couldn't take care of it by myself.
Yeah. Have you ever considered gardening with friends?
Like a shared garden and a community garden?
Yeah.
I have. And when I think about it, I say, well, I have my own garden to take care of. I don't really want to go take care of another one with other people. There's a community garden by this at the school by my house, and they invite people to come help them because they're only there on the weekday, with the kids. And the kids, it's an elementary school, so the kids aren't really responsible for it. They just go out and help sometimes.
That's fair.
So I would go help with that because that's helping the school and helping the kids, and that's really fun.
Yeah, that is fair.
It's a really, I brought that up because if you don't have a place to put a garden or containers, or maybe you only have room for like a couple pots of flowers, a community garden is a great option because then you can help other people and then you all get to share what's in there. So that's an awesome option.
How about if you have a hard time sharing?
Well, you really have to hope that the people you are gardening with are fair to one another. Like if somebody came in and ate all the tomatoes, I'd be really mad.
Yeah. I just feel like, yeah. So, what is your favorite type of gardening of all time?
Oh, type of gardening? Like you mean like pots or community gardens or like in the dirt?
Yes.
I guess in the dirt is my favorite, but I really like having fruit trees. And I have two, but when I was growing up, my mom's best friend had a huge yard and they had all kinds of different fruit trees. So if I had more room, if I had like a half acre, I would put more fruit trees because they had plums, nectarines, peaches, apples. They had like a cross that was like a plum apricot tree that was really cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen like what is all the hybrid plants things that you've seen?
I haven't seen a lot of the plants myself. I've just seen the things that are in the grocery store. So fruit, a lot of the fruits are crossed now because you can, instead of having the bees do it, if you take the pollen from different plants, sometimes you can get crossed things that come out. Oh, but you know what? One of my friends, you've met her before. She has a garden at her house too, but she had a really weird combination of thing one year. So she had a squash, a zucchini squash, and a pumpkin get cross-pollinated. So the bees were pollinating one and the other, and all the pollen got mixed up. And she grew what we called a squumpkin. It was a squash pumpkin, and it was the shape of a pumpkin, but it was green like a zucchini, and it tasted like
what? What? No way.
we called it the squumpkin, and it was big. It was like her significant other had to pick it up because it was so big.
Wow. I would never want that.
We thought it was just funny, and we carved it. We didn't do anything with it.
But yeah, so, um, let's see here. Um, out of all the plants you've ever planted, what's the stuff you would most recommend to beginners?
Marigold flowers, they keep the bug. The bugs don't like those, so it's important to put marigolds in your garden, and they're pretty cheap to buy. You can buy a little pack of them that has 6 plants in it, and tomatoes and peppers, because they don't. You can get a small variety of tomato. It's called the patio tomato, and it only grows to be about 2 feet tall, and the tomatoes are kind of like the size of a Roma tomato, like a little bit bigger than, maybe like a tennis ball size is a good way to describe that. So they don't get super large, but they're still delicious. And then pepper plants don't get super tall either. So you can grow jalapenos or poblanos or Anaheim chilies, and they don't take up a lot of room either. So I think tomatoes, peppers, and marigolds are all good.
What's the hottest pepper you've ever grown?
A super chili.
Oh,
And I don't remember how many scovilles it has. Let me Google it really fast. So, super chili. I think ghost pepper is still hotter. I will Google real fast and tell you. And I did grow ghost peppers, so maybe those were. So a super chili is 50,000 scovilles. And then let me see what a ghost pepper is. So 50. Ghost pepper scoville is 1,000,000. So, all right, the super chili is only half as hot as a ghost pepper.
So
I've grown both of them.
so you've grown a ghost pepper.
Yeah, and I had
Does it,
to.
like,
It was
burn your hand? Does it burn
yeah,
your
it was
hand?
really kind of bad because I had gloves and I couldn't do anything with them fresh because they're so hot, and I don't really eat things that are super hot like that. And so I dried them out. And then I had other peppers I was growing that year. Like, you can grow cherry peppers that aren't very hot at all, but they look like cherry tomatoes.
I
And
see.
I took a whole bunch of different peppers that I grew and dried them all out. And then I put them in a coffee grinder and made my own like pepper flakes. And that was pretty good. But then I had to wear a mask over my face. This was way before COVID, but I had to go to the store and get like a regular mask because when I was grinding the peppers up with the coffee bean grinder, it made my eyes burn and I was coughing.
Yikes. Ouch.
So then I learned like you have to have gloves, and I was plugging. Then I also took it outside. And so I used the coffee bean grinder outside on the outlet outside. So it didn't like make my house spicy.
Ouch. Why did you say that when it came to downsides?
Well, I forgot.
Oh man. Huh. So what are some interesting gardening stories that wouldn't fit into a question that I'd ever think about asking?
So besides me falling off the garden, and I had going along with the super chilies. So when I grew super chilies, I had a friend that came over and wanted to try one. And before I could warn him, he just ate it, like right off the plant, like standing there in the garden.
Oh man.
He turned bright red and like started snotting and coughing. And like I had to run into the house and get milk. Water doesn't help. You have to have something that has some fat in it. The milk is usually, as long as it's like 1%. It can't be non-fat. That doesn't work.
Imagine if the only thing you had in the house that time was non-fat.
Oh, it would be sad. It would be sad time.
Yeah.
And then I'll tell you things that happened that were funny. Then when I'd grow big sunflowers, so I have these mammoth sunflowers that can get like 8 feet tall, and they have these big, the flower head is really big, and when it dries out, that's how you get sunflower seeds. And so
that's how
squirrels
one gets sunflower seeds. I see.
Yeah, so the squirrels actually ran, like they climbed up the stalk of the sunflower and chewed off the head of the sunflower, which I didn't know until later. But I was sitting in my kitchen and I was just looking out the window, and all I could see bobbing along the fence was this giant sunflower. And I was like, what the heck is going on? Because I just saw the sunflower like moving across the fence. And then I realized that it was a squirrel, and it was like trying to take it away out of my yard.
Wow.
It wanted all the seeds out of it. And I'm sure it went and like stored all the seeds in its little den for the winter. That was funny because I wasn't expecting to see it. I had a hawk fly down into my yard. It was huge. It flew down in my yard and actually grabbed a snake out of my garden.
Interesting.
And I was just sitting in my dining room looking out, and this giant hawk was out there, and I looked and I was like, what is that thing? A turkey? and it was this hawk, and it flew away, and the snake was like hanging from its talons.
Wow. So
That was pretty cool.
I'm guessing that's one of the reasons of why you garden. Also, I know you said you've had dogs and we're showing them on like the thing we have here, but like how often how hard is it to keep the dogs out of the garden?
My dogs are really lazy, and they will not jump over the little gate that I have. They will not jump up into the flower bed or up into the garden. So my dogs are really good. They're Great Danes, and even though they easily could just hop up there, they don't. They mind pretty well.
That's pretty good. My dog would be a train wreck.
Your dog has been to my house and jumps up there and jumps all over everything.
No wonder she's not allowed back.
See, she's not often allowed back.
Oh man, I'm that I'm like, yeah. I was like, why ain't my dog allowed back? My mom didn't end up giving me that answer.
What would teach her a lesson would be if she got up there and then ate a pepper, and she would learn.
I don't know if I would want to see that or not.
I know. I wouldn't want her to be in, but that might be kind of funny.
Yeah. Honestly, if she were to eat a pepper, I'd probably laugh because it's like it's on you, dog.
She would
Also,
probably
I don't
yell
think
at
she'd
me.
even.
She would
I
be
don't
mad
think.
at me.
I
Yell
don't
at me.
think. Yeah. You think Father Pastry would yell at you?
No, Father Pastry would laugh.
Oh man. Um. I hate to break it to you, but I don't think. I don't think. I don't think she would eat a pepper.
I don't think she would either. She would just trample all over it and walk on it.
Yeah. Um. I know I asked Mama Pastry during her episode, but like, have you ever considered making salsa? Or wait, you do make salsa?
I do make salsa, but I don't sell it. I just make it to eat it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grow onions and garlic and the cilantro and the tomatoes, and I've made it before.
How hard is it to grow an onion?
Oh, it's so easy. They grow really well, and so this time of year in the fall in Colorado, and it's just in general in the northern hemisphere, you can go to a gardening center and you buy these tiny, tiny little onion. They're kind of like onion seeds, and then you plant them, and then they'll grow. They'll kind of be dormant. They won't grow very much, but then they'll have establishment in the ground, and then they'll come up in the spring. So onions and garlic are easy. And garlic, you can just go to the store and buy a garlic clove, and then you pick the little cloves off, and then just one in like a hole that's a couple inches deep, and then they'll grow the next spring.
So, I have a question. So, how often can you go ahead and buy a fruit from the store? Then you go ahead and take it back and like how easy is it to like buy something from the store, eat it, then like plant it afterwards?
You can just a good amount of things. Pumpkins, you can definitely, when you carve your pumpkins at Halloween, you could save all of the stringiness and the seeds in there and just bury them somewhere in your backyard, and you'll get pumpkins the next year. That pumpkins are good. Any of the peppers that you buy in the store, you can scrape out the seeds and try throwing them in the ground. So it depends on where you are, but in Colorado, sometimes they don't grow really well. It depends on when you put them in the ground. So if you try to do it in like June, you'll have more success with those things. So it's kind of weird to the pumpkins you could put in the ground and they might survive through the winter, the pumpkin seeds, but like pepper seeds I couldn't plant right now, they would die through the winter. Some of them are real sensitive to the cold.
I see. Also, I'm probably gonna think of some myths here, but is it true that if you sing to your plants, they'll grow better?
Well, I have heard that if you cuss at your plants, they grow better too. And I've tried,
No!
and I don't think.
No! Let's just say during like equipment failure, I know a computer is not a plant, but when I have sworn at my computer off air, most generally it doesn't want to work for me.
I think the plants, if you're going to be outside singing to them or cussing at them, you're generally going to also be doing other things. So, like pulling weeds and like trimming them. And so, it's probably a combination of all of it that's helping them.
I did not know you swore at the plants.
Yeah.
Oh man, Kaylee. Why? No! What did the plants ever do to you?
Well, some of them have stabbed me. Like some of them have thorns, and then I get mad.
But who decided to go ahead and stick their hand in the
I know.
thorns?
I know. Yeah, I know.
Who decided that that plant was gonna be there, huh?
Oh, well, I mean, I planted it there, but yeah, I should know better.
The plant was just doing its planty thing.
I have yelled at the aphids. The aphids are the worst bugs because they eat my kale plants, and then I'm really mad. And so I cuss at those a lot too. I tell them to die aphid scum.
So I have a question for you. I know this is like a ton of questions, but is there any bugs that are good for the garden?
Um, well, I mean, bees are insects, and they're good for the garden. The even wasps are good because even though they might bite us, like they're good too. Aphids are bad. There's worms are good. They're insects too, not really bugs. Worms are really good for your soil, but a lot of little like gnats and aphids, even though they're really cool, I've had some little praying mantis come to my garden, and I think they're really awesome looking, but they chew holes in there in my plants.
So what tends to happen if, like, let's say you get a sudden freeze? Is it like an 100% chance that you're gonna lose all of your plants that year?
If we get an early freeze, sometimes we get an early freeze the beginning of October. And if I'm watching the news and different social media kind of warns me, then I can cover up a lot of the plants with trash bags and they'll live. But I'm waiting for our first freeze of the year, like for this year. And we did get some snow and a lot of the things died, but I covered up the tomatoes and they lived.
Oh, okay.
It kind of depends on how long it's cold too, because when it snowed last week in Colorado, it was only cold for 24 hours and then it warmed back up, and I think the plants recovered because I still have a lot of herbs that are alive.
Yeah. Hold on. I need to go ahead and ban a bot from my chat. But so is there any state in the United States where you would not recommend to start a garden? Because it's like a lot of depends on the state with this hobby.
Well, Montana and Wyoming and Minnesota and Maine are really cold, and you don't have very much time for things to grow. Like only a couple of months are warm. So most things aren't really going to grow enough to make it worth it if you want to eat things. If you just want flowers, then it might be okay. But the northernmost states of the United States are terrible because it's so cold.
Yeah.
In Alaska.
Yeah, that's kind of a given.
A lot of those places, if people really want to grow fruit and vegetables, then they have a greenhouse.
Okay. Also, would you have if it was possible for you to get a greenhouse, would you get a greenhouse?
Oh yeah, because then I'd have more things outside. And there's not a lot of room in my basement for the hydroponic kale and peppers. So it'd be nice to have some more space outside that things are protected. I'd have to give up some space from something else, but it would be a good trade-off.
Yeah. What are greenhouses made out of?
It depends. You can have really fancy ones that are actually made out of wood, like a barn, and you can actually put electricity in there and have a heater and lights. But then on the opposite scale, on a really inexpensive greenhouse, quote unquote, it's PVC pipes and like a clear or white plastic tarp. So it doesn't really keep it very warm. It just keeps the rain and the snow off of the plants.
I see. So yeah. So have any beginner's advice for people who are thinking they want a garden?
Yeah, you just have to start trying a couple things. And instead of overthinking it, like just try a couple things, see how it goes. And then you might be surprised. And then things will go well and you'll add more the next year.
Yeah.
Don't go crazy. Like just start with a few things and see how you like it.
Yeah. How many people do you know? Like, don't say their names, but how many people do you know that would go ahead and just completely kill the plants on accident?
One of my best friends that's in California, she tries every year to grow things, but she always forgets to water. And she has sprinklers, but they don't, like wherever she's planting, they don't reach it enough. And so she forgets to water them and then they always die.
So,
And even if she has, like, sometimes you can just have a couple pots of parsley or basil on your sink, like in your kitchen window. And she even kills those because she doesn't water those and they're sitting right in front of the sink.
how?
I don't know. I think because she has young babies and she's just distracted.
Yeah. Also, this is going to be a very, very random question. You're going to probably think I'm weird for this, but do you consider your plants your children?
No,
Oh, right,
no.
because your dogs are your children.
My dogs are my children. So the plants, I'm grateful for their beautiful energy and they make my house feel homey and I get to eat lots of things from them. So I really like it, but they're not my children. Especially when I eat them. That'd be really awkward.
You. Oh, man. But it is a fair question, right?
I know, yeah. I
So,
guess the other plants in the house that aren't edible, they have lots of plants in the house just for ambiance. And I could see how some people would think they're like children, but I don't. They think they're just nice to have.
yeah, that's good. But, so if you were to go ahead and run this show, what questions would you ask? If you were me, what would you ask a gardener that is on your show?
I would want to know what are some tricks about organic gardening because I try to organic garden as much as possible. So I don't go to the gardening center and buy pesticide spray. So I try to do natural things for the insects that come, like so for the aphids. Something I read about is you can boil garlic and onions and then put that water that you boil with onion and garlic in a spray bottle and spray the plants, and the aphids don't like it. Well, that didn't work. So I would love to ask somebody, what is a good way to keep the insects from eating everything and organic?
Alrighty, and you're supposed to answer your own question, by the way.
So some of the things I've also tried is marigolds. They're good to plant in the garden, but it's also good to actually take, once the flowers are done blooming, you take the flower heads off and soak them in water and spray your plants with the marigold water, and that works better.
So
But
yeah,
sure, there's other things.
no wonder
out
they
there.
say. No wonder they say that something really bugs you.
Yeah,
I didn't really.
but I'm sure there's things out there, and that's why I would want to ask, what else am I missing that I should be doing?
Yeah. Also, are ants good for the garden?
Ants? I don't think so. The ants could really cause problems if you get like a big ant farm underneath your plants, because then they're gonna mess up the roots. Plants won't live. But I haven't had any major ant problems. But it's really good to have worms. And one of the things I learned about later on was, if you have a compost pile, you can get red worms and put them in your compost, and then they'll lay eggs. And then when you put the compost in the ground, there's a bunch of worm eggs in there, and then you get more worms later.
All right. So, when it comes to composting, how good is compost compared to like other sources of nutrients?
Compost is one of the best. So when you make compost at home, it's recommended that you put it in some kind of container, otherwise rats and mice might get into it. So you have part leaves and then part vegetable and fruit scraps. So I have a little bucket on my counter, and whenever I have broccoli stems or banana peels, I put them in a little bucket, and then I bring it up to the garden into my compost bin. I save the leaves that I rake in the fall in a big pile in the corner of the yard, and then I take leaves and like make my own compost. And that's one of the best things for your garden, instead of buying like packages of soil from Home Depot.
Yeah, I just thought of like another question that would be good for the general questions, but I'm gonna ask you it. With this with with this hobby, how easy or hard is it to have other hobbies?
Well, in the summer, when I'm super busy in the garden, like the 2 hours on the weekend day, I don't really have a lot of other hobbies. I do like going paddleboarding, and so I garden in the morning and then paddleboard later, but that's about, and then I go hiking, but it takes a lot of my time because I have such a big yard.
Yeah, so it's again like, how much gardening do you want to do?
Yeah. So, when I was in college and I just had some containers, it wasn't that bad. And then I got to do all kinds of stuff like going surfing and stuff because I live by the beach.
Yeah. I feel like, the whole how easy it is it to have other hobbies would be a fair question to add to my show. But yeah.
Yeah.
Please keep in mind that I think this show is a relatively newer show, so audio games have been around a way longer. But yeah, so let's see here. So what is I think can you go ahead and tell me what plant would be the best to plant if you want the most product out of it?
Lettuce is good because you eat the whole thing. You plant lettuce seed.
Oh, lettuce.
Lettuce. So lettuce seeds you grow, and then you eat everything that pops up.
That's good.
And
Does lettuce take up a lot of water?
so that's going back to our container garden versus a regular traditional in-ground garden. Lettuce is really good to have in containers because it does need a lot of water. And when it's in the container, it is contained in there and it doesn't evaporate as much. My lettuce that grows in the ground, it gets dried out really fast. And if you don't water it enough, the lettuce gets bitter and then it's gross. So
So,
lettuce is really good in containers.
I see. So, when it comes to like planters, like multi-level planters, what's your thoughts about those?
Those are really cool when you don't have a ton of space. So if it kind of could be like a bookshelf, but the shelves are angled so that stuff grows up and out of them. Those can be really awesome.
But it
And
depends
lettuce
on.
can go in there. Lettuce can go in there, and the tomatoes can go at the top. So the tomatoes can grow taller at the top. And then if you have like a zucchini in the middle, it will grow out the side. So it might be really fun to do that.
So it depends on where you put what.
Yeah.
And do you think that hydroponics or traditional gardening is better?
Mm. I think for the plants that I like to grow, traditional is better because it's really hard to do cucumbers and tomatoes in a hydroponic space because the plants like to get so big. But lettuce and kale and chard and peppers, little peppers like cherry peppers, grow great in hydroponic.
Yeah, and another question I have is when it comes to different kinds of things like tomatoes, different kinds of tomatoes, different kinds of like different things,
Mhm.
does like how you go ahead and like have them grow so like I don't even know how to word this question, but like does it matter what kind it is as opposed to like how it grows?
A little bit.
So like would you grow a cherry tomato similarly than a like one of the tomatoes you would put on a burger?
They grow a little bit different. You have to have a really strong trellis. If you grow, those are called beefsteak tomatoes. So the beefsteak tomatoes get really big and they get really heavy. So as your tomato plant is growing, you have to make sure the branches of the tomato plant get put on a trellis. Like I have a sometimes the thing that people use is a tomato cage and it's like different circles at different levels, but they're not very strong. So I have a square trellis that's really thick metal and it has a lot of different layers because you tuck your tomato branches into there so that when the tomatoes start growing, the branches are supported by the metal and they're not just falling off the plant.
I see. I see. So, what is the best garden gadget to have?
Ooh. Well, I don't know if there's just one. I have this one thing that pulls weeds, and it kind of looks like a triangle, but then it has a little chunk taken out of it because that helps you put put it down into the ground and then pull the weeds out. And that's a really nice tool.
What is it called again?
I have to find a picture of it for you. I don't know what it's called. It's like a weed tool. Let me find it.
So what's the
And
most so what's the most annoying thing about gardening?
when this isn't annoying, but it's a lesson that I learned. So I have this big garden, right? And then when I want to go out of town for a long weekend, I have to not only get a dog sitter, but I have to find somebody that will take care of my garden.
Yeah. I feel like finding
So
someone to take care of your garden is kind of difficult.
I have sprinklers, but you still have to water certain things a little bit more, and you have to check for bugs. And there's a really amazing person that comes to my house and stays with my dogs and does gardening, and I let them eat whatever is ready because I think that's only fair. So whatever's
Yeah.
ready to eat when they're here, they get to eat.
Yeah, that's only fair. And um other than your plant killers, is there anyone that you would not necessarily go ahead and recommend this hobby to?
um, I guess if you don't care about where food comes from and you just want to go to the store, then I wouldn't recommend gardening because you're probably not going to get very much enjoyment out of it.
Yeah, and then another question is, as far as cost goes, and I asked this one to Mama Pastry as well, but is it more cost effective to grow your own things or buy things from the store?
I'm never giving you a simple answer with any of these things. It depends on what it is. So, things that can be really expensive in the store might be tomatoes, avocados. So when I lived in California, I grew avocados, and that was really good because avocados are really expensive. And cheap things that aren't worth it to me are pumpkins because they're not that expensive. Watermelons take all season just to grow like 4 watermelons by fall. And so to me that's not worth it because they're on sale all the time for 4th of July and Labor Day. And then a lot of the herbs that I have so many. I don't have to buy herbs at the store, and they can get kind of expensive when they're organic. And they grow so easy. So
Um,
it depends on what it is.
which I find it kind of interesting. Like, why is it that the things that are easy to grow are expensive at the store, but yet the things that are hard to grow are cheaper at the store?
But it might be easy to grow just in our yard in small quantities, but for a commercial farmer that's has a business, maybe they just can't get enough to make it worth it.
Yeah, that's understandable. It's just like it's kind of off-putting how there's like literally um let how am I gonna word this? It's kind of off-putting to me how it's like so easy to grow, but yet it's so expensive. Like blueberry or like blueberries are hard to grow, but yet they're cheap at the store. I've heard
I
cheaper.
think it depends on the time of year and where the local farmer is, because blueberries can get really expensive in the store for the small quantity that you get. But like in Colorado, I think blueberries don't really grow here in general, so they're more expensive to us because we have to order that. The stores have to order them from different states.
Yeah, but from like Mama Pastry and the Jam episode, she
Mhm.
says that the raspberries are the most expensive,
Oh, okay.
and blueberries are the cheapest.
Oh, okay.
So that's why I'm asking these questions.
Yeah. And I only know from what I grow and what I see in my local stores, so, and then a couple things from California, but
And now this question is more of a joke, is but is a tomato a fruit or a vegetable?
okay, are you ready? So, nutritionally, a tomato is a vegetable, but horticulturally, it's a fruit.
So
So, when you grow a tomato, I'm not a horticulturist, a botanist, but the way, like the makeup and the genetics of the tomato are more like a fruit, but it is very low carb and is not sweet at all. So that makes it a vegetable. So as far as I'm concerned, nutrition wise, I just call it a vegetable.
I see. Um, but so it's kind of like the non-binary plant.
Yeah.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
can't. I can't believe it took me until now to go ahead and
I
make
know,
that
I never
joke.
thought of that.
But yeah. Um, so you're saying that it depends on like how much space you have as far as like how much time it takes.
Yes.
I feel like when it comes to the show, this is one of the hobbies where it's like none of my questions exactly fit. But to be fair, they're like most of my beginning questions are just to get started, and it's more of the
That
whole
makes
like
sense.
get the gears turning for like
Yeah.
the random questions later on. But what takes the most water to grow?
Corn takes a lot of water. And that might be one of the reasons I haven't grown it yet. And it takes a lot of space. Pumpkins take a lot of water. Watermelons take a lot of water. Tomatoes take a lot of water. Herbs don't take that much. Sunflowers don't take very much. They're pretty sturdy. And then everything else is kind of in the middle.
Yeah, so is it easier to grow plants that are underground or non underground, such as like potatoes versus tomatoes?
Mm. Well, potatoes grow in, you can have not as good of soil and potatoes will grow, but tomatoes, you have to have pretty good soil that has good compost in it. Potatoes and carrots, if your soil is too clay-like and thick, you won't get good potatoes or carrots because the ground is so thick that like they just can't grow well.
Yeah, that's understandable. And then,
They're pretty low maintenance. You know, you could put an onion in the ground, your carrots, your potatoes, your sweet potatoes, and you don't have to worry about bugs as much because they're under the ground as long as you don't have a big ant problem. So there's the ant thing that came up. Um, they're pretty low maintenance.
so I'm guessing there's almost no consistencies when it comes to gardening. Like, no consistencies.
You have to learn what each plant wants, but then once you know the plants, then the plants themselves are consistent, but it's not consistent across each type of thing. You're right.
But yeah, as far as like I've heard also, okay, I want you to go more into mess you've heard, but like and like busting them. But I've heard that like if you alternate what you grow in the soil, since different plants require different things,
Mm-hmm.
is it good to go ahead and like alternate what you grow where?
Uh-huh. It is. It's really good to switch. So the the thing that's also important though is if you're going to put more compost in. So it's good to do both. But you know, one year you might have tomatoes on one side and then green beans on the other, and then switch them. But if you don't have a very big yard and you can't do that, then and sometimes um, you just have one big planter and there's not a whole bunch of room to switch things. But you could still do it. You could have like in the left corner a squash and then the right corner onions and then switch them the next year. So it's good to switch them, but it's also good to add compost and maybe even a little bit of manure into your bed every year. And that's the good thing about when it does get cold here in Colorado, it's good to take all the dead plants out of your soil and then put compost in. And then it kind of has the winter to like settle in.
I see. But yeah, what other gardening mess have you ever heard?
I've also heard that certain plants don't like to be next to each other, and that is true. And I don't know off the top of my head. I always Google it when I plant every year, but certain things like to be together. So like tomatoes and cucumbers like to be together. And it has to do with what they like in the soil. And then I think it also depends on like tomatoes have a smell to them And I think the cucumbers are okay with that. That sounds really weird.
Yeah.
But like, and then so the herbs, like it's good to grow your herbs all over the garden because the bugs, when you go by your herbs and like touch them, they smell good to us, but they smell bad to bugs. And so that's good to like have the herbs everywhere. So that's a myth that's true. I'm trying to think of something I learned that's false. Huh. Um, I think for the most part, I know this isn't 100% to do with gardening, but people say that they like their dogs. Like sometimes people have little dogs that like to dig, and they'll tell their dog, like they'll put a treat in the ground and tell their dog to dig, and they'll dig the hole that their plant is going to go into. But it's really bad because the dog is just learning how to dig. And so if you have it dig in your garden to plant something, inevitably it's going to wind up digging more when you're not home because you told it to and doesn't understand the difference of when it's okay and when it's not.
Yeah. But yeah. Um. So, do you have any other myths?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of some other things that I've kind of learned. These are all, but these things are all true. So there's Japanese beetles that come into your yard. And the myth is that if you squish them to kill them, they release scent to other beetles to like come for help. And that's true. So for Japanese beetles really like grapes and raspberries and another leaf I can't think of right now. Grapes, raspberries, and something else. But in any case, you have to drown them in like a little bucket of water so that they don't get squished and release the thing that tells other beetles to come help.
Oh, so you had to drown the beetles.
Yeah, it's kind of stress relieving too.
So you like to kill bugs for fun?
That sounds really bad, but I do because they were trying to eat my plants.
Yeah. Um. So what other things have tried to eat your plants?
See what else? Um, I heard about mint. So mint is one of the herbs that people usually like to make tea out of. And the warning that comes with mint is that it grows crazy like a weed. And I didn't listen. So I grew mint one year in the ground. And even though I planted it right in front of my shed, it started popping up on the first tier of my flower bed. Like it crawled all the way that way. And I pulled up the roots, and the roots went all the way from my shed down into the flower bed. And I couldn't believe it. So
Wow.
it's super invasive. And so now I only plant mint in pots because it's
Yeah.
everywhere.
Is there any good weeds to have, or are weeds always bad?
So there's a weed that's called purslane, and I know people have seen it. I'll try to pull up a picture of it. It grows on the top of the soil, and it kind of like spider webs out, but you can actually eat it. I don't like it, but you can eat it. Dandelions you could technically also eat, and I've heard that they are good because they break up the soil when it's really thick clay-like soil, but I think they taste awful, and people will eat the greens and put them in salad, and I think they taste really bitter and gross.
Is it true that when it comes to rhubarb, which is like a kind of celery kind of thing, is it true that the leaves are poisonous?
Yes, it's a super weird plant because the stalks do look like celery, kind of like, and they're pink, but the leaves are poisonous. So it's so weird that there's this plant that if we eat the wrong part of it, we'll get sick. It's really strange.
Yeah, what other strange plants are there? Channel appropriate, please.
Yes. Well, you know what's really weird is cactus fruit. So the cactus fruit, usually it grows on like super tall cactus, which I know we don't have in very many in Colorado, just a few. But when I lived in California, we had a lot. And the cactus fruit is interesting because it starts out growing with needles on it, just like the cactus. But then when it's ready to eat, the needles will fall off. So it's kind of like a warning, like, don't eat me yet. I'm not ready. But then the needles will come off and you can eat the fruit. And I think it tastes pretty good. I've taken off the cactus and then you cut it in half and then you just scoop out the insides. I don't eat the outside of it.
I see.
It
But
kind of tastes like acai a little bit.
what's acai?
I've never eaten the plant itself, but like acai is a berry, and they flavor like smoothies with it. Sometimes it's usually like a juice and things, but it's kind of tropical tasting, or like passion fruit kind of tastes. Cactus fruit, kind of like passion fruit.
I see. But yeah. Um. So,
Acai.
is there anything else that you want to say about our gardening?
So I do a lot of fruits and vegetables and herbs, but some people really like growing lots of different flowers, and there's nothing wrong with that either. The flowers, you don't have to have any vegetables if you don't want. But sometimes people just like planting flowers just because it's stress relieving and you get to be in the dirt and digging and it's pretty. So there's nothing wrong with that either. So if there's people listening, and I've talked a lot about fruit and vegetables, you might want to buy flowers too, and that there's nothing wrong with that. And usually for flowers, it's easier to buy little baby flower plants and let them grow because they don't grow as well from seed. Ooh, but also speaking of seeds, there are some flowers that are really easy to grow from seed, like marigolds. And something that I've done with my friend from here in Colorado, this time of year in fall, marigolds are dying. And the seeds for marigolds are actually stored right underneath the flower. So if you look at a marigold, there's the flower part, but then there's a little green part underneath, and then the stem. And then the section that connects the flower to the stem is where all the seeds are. So if you go around neighborhoods and pick the dead flowers, you can save them for the next year and plant the seeds. So my friend and I will go around to like shopping centers, because they're going to rip out the plants anyway, and take all of the flower heads. And sometimes people have looked at us weird because we're putting flowers into dog poop bags, but we don't have a dog. And so they're like, what are they doing carrying around doggy poop bags and picking flowers? And then we walk away with poop bags.
Interesting.
Like weirdos. Yeah.
I would probably even give a weird look at that point.
Yeah. I understand that, and I'll take it. That's okay. But yeah, so just like fruit and vegetable, like certain flowers are easier to grow from seed or from plants, and certain flowers like sun, certain flowers like shade. So a lot of what I talked about with the fruits and vegetables is applicable to flowers too. Some of them like certain types of acidity in the soil, like hydrangea flowers. They'll change color based on what acidity is in the soil. So if you have hydrangeas, there's pink ones and purple ones and blue ones, all depending on how acidic or basic the soil is. There's a whole world of gardening.
Yeah, and this is just like a small snapshot.
Tiny piece of it, yeah.
Like this
Yeah.
is a 2 hour show, and yet what percentage of gardening have you covered in this episode?
Oh, I don't know, probably only like 10%.
Jeez. Wow. So we're pretty much going to go ahead and we're gonna go ahead and do closing announcements now,
Okay.
and Do you have any closing announcements? Any last words you have for my donut batch?
Thank you very much for having me. It's been really fun. And if you have any other questions for me, you could message me on Instagram.
Alrighty, so this lovely guest. I don't think it has ever happened before, but um, but I guess Kaylee is open to more further questions on her Instagram. But yeah, I'm gonna post that again. So my closing announcements are my my Instagram, and I'm probably gonna add an extra like work stream on Saturday because um so here's do you want guys want to know an interesting fact? Um Kaylee was actually supposed to see me in person this weekend. But wait, I think weren't you supposed to come up? No.
Yes,
Yes? Yes, sorry.
I was. I was
Okay.
going to come see you.
Yeah. But due to the snow where I'm currently at, or like the snow in the forecast, they decided not to come. So they as in like a whole group of people. um
We didn't want to get stuck in trying to drive back and forth between where we live because the snow might get really bad and then we might get stuck and we all have to go back to work.
yeah. So I understand how my role obligations is like very far out there. But yeah, so I'm probably gonna take up at least some of that time with a stream, probably on Saturday. But yeah, no promises because this show is literally the only thing that's promised as far as streams go. But sometimes I tend to do extras because of like running behind on like the channel or whatnot. But yeah, do you have any other announcements, Kelly?
Kale is not bad tasting. You should try it.
Uh, wait. How long do you massage your kale for?
I massage my kale for about 1 minute.
Man. You want to know what would be more use of that massage, Kaylee?
A human massage instead of massaging kale.
I was gonna say massaging my shoulders.
I know.
But yeah, anyways, do you have an outro?
No. Thank you for having me.
Alrighty, so I platonically love you.